All right, today we're going to work on an assignment called Nonfiction Text Structure Examples, and we're going to use our notes to support us. So make sure you have your notebook and that you're opened to page 6 and page 7. I know, page 6, 7. Because that is where we wrote down and put descriptions or definitions of the different types of text structures that exist in nonfiction text. So the 5 types are descriptive, chronological order, cause and effect, compare and contrast, and finally, problem and solution. Now, if you don't remember what a text structure is, we also wrote the definition at the top of our notes. So let's take a look at that really fast, okay? Text structure is the way information in a text is organized for the reader. So essentially, when an author is writing a nonfiction piece, they might use one of these text structures to help their reader better understand their topic, or whatever it is they want their reader to know about. So today, in this assignment, I've written some paragraphs about apartheid, which is that time period in South Africa where people were segregated based on their race, right? And we've been talking about that in our book a lot, so that should not be new to you. On this paper, the first thing I'm going to do, you probably have already done this, is put your name on your paper. You should also put the date. And I'm just going to put class period 1, but you put the class period that you belong to. Now, something that's really important that you do, whether it's on a test or an assignment or homework, is you need to make sure you read those instructions. I'm going to remind you how to annotate these instructions. We're going to try and figure out what are the steps that we need to complete in order to get full credit on this assignment. So let's read it once, and then we'll go back and annotate it. Read each paragraph about apartheid below. In each paragraph, underline key words that let you know what the text structure is. I underlined keywords in the first passage for you to use as an example. After underlining, write a sentence that proves why each passage matches its text structure. Okay, now that I've read it once, I can go back and figure out what the steps are to complete this assignment. The first thing it tells me to do is read each paragraph. That's step 1. After I read each paragraph, I need to underline key words that let me know what the text structure is. So that is step 2. I told you that I wrote or underlined some keywords in the first passage, right? That's just helpful information for you to know, so I'm not going to underline it. And then the next thing says, after underlining, write a sentence that proves why each passage matches its text structure. So I'll just underline, write a sentence, and that is my step 3. So those are the steps you need to follow. And make sure you write this on your paper so I know that you are following along with me. Okay. The first text structure that we are going to look at, it's not in the same order as your notes, but that's okay, is sequence and chronological. So my first step, remember, I need to read each paragraph. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. I'm going to read the whole paragraph, and then I'll underline any key words that help me know what text structure it is, okay? Apartheid was a challenging point in history. It first started when the National Party, an all-white political party in South Africa, institutionalized racial segregation. The first law that was established under apartheid was the Mixed Marriages Act of 1949, when people of different races were prohibited from marrying one another. Real quick, the word institutionalized just means that they used racial segregation as part of their government. It was the law, which means it's part of an institution. Okay. Another law that followed closely after that was the Immorality Amendment Act of 1950, where people of different races were not even allowed to date one another. After these laws and others were established, the people living in South Africa became extremely segregated from one another. Okay, so I've got some information about apartheid, but what is my second step? I need to underline those key words that help me figure out the text structure. Now I know that I'm looking for the sequence and chronological text structure. If you remember what that is, great, underline those key words. If you don't, let's take a look at our notes. So chronological order or sequence says this text describes a sequence of events or a list of steps. So some of our clue words might be first, next, finally, before, or after. And I've got a picture that just takes us through some steps here. I also added a note at the top. This was one of our vocab words last quarter, but if you forgot what sequence means, go ahead and write this on your paper. Sequence is a synonym for order of events that happens, okay? So you can write order. So now that I know that sequence or chronological has to do with order, I'm looking for some of those clue words, right? I'm looking for some of these words right here. So I'm going to go back and read this again. Apartheid was a challenging point in history. I'm going to stop. I don't see any clue words there, so I'm going to keep going. It first, I'm going to underline that one again, started when the National Party, an all-white political party in South Africa, institutionalized racial segregation. Okay, no other clue words. The first law, I might just underline the word first, that was established under apartheid was the Mixed Marriages Act of 1949. That's a date. It wasn't included in my notes, but anytime a date is listed, that lets me know this is probably something that's happening in chronological order. When people of different races were prohibited from marrying one another. Another law that followed closely after that was the Immorality Amendment Act of 1950. So again, there's another date. I'm going to underline that date as well. Where people of different races were not even allowed to date one another. After these laws and others were established, the people living in South Africa became extremely segregated from one another. Okay, so that's my second step, right? I underlined any key words that reminded me of the text structure. What do I need to do next? Now I need to write a sentence that proves why each passage matches its text structure. I'm going to go ahead and give you a sentence starter to help you answer this question. So the question says, how do you know this passage follows the sequence chronological text structure? We're going to say this passage, because we're just going to restate that question, right? Uses the chronological text structure because and I want you to go ahead and pause this video and finish that sentence. Okay, so I went ahead and wrote in my answer. And I said this passage uses the chronological text structure because the dates of laws are put in order throughout the text. That is a really great reason. That lets me know that this is sequence or chronological. I could have also talked about the fact that they said things like the first law. This first started when? After these laws, right? Because if I'm using the words first and then after, that lets me know these things happened in order, right? That lets me know as a reader what the order was of events, and that helps me better understand what apartheid was. I'm going to go through one more example on this assignment with you, and then I'm going to let you try this on your own or with a partner. So if you are feeling like you understand the assignment from here and you want to give it a try on your own, please do. If you are feeling like I need a little bit more help or a little bit more support, watch me do one more and see if that helps clear up some questions for you. So the next text structure that we're going to look at is description. And in our notes, I actually titled it descriptive, but I'm going to go ahead and add description just to remind myself those are the same things, right? The definition of this text structure says this text, whoa, I wrote this text, that's me. This text describes characteristics of something, okay? Also, that wasn't a mistake. I was just leaving that there for you to see, right? Making sure that you're following along. I've still never made a mistake a day in my life. Some of my clue words are, for example, such as, or any adjectives are going to let me know, because adjectives are those descriptive or describing words. My picture shows me that I have some topic in the middle and that I'm adding lots of details related to that topic, right? So if I wanted to talk about calico critters, right, I might start by saying something like, calico critters are little toys. And then I would add in lots of details to help you understand what those things are. So I might say something like, the company Calico Critters makes a bunch of different animal families for people to collect and play with. They actually started as Sylvanian families in, I can't remember what year they were established, and later changed to Calico Critters. What's another thing I could say? All the Calico Critter figures are made of velveteen, or velvet. I don't know if that was the right word. So they all have a texture to them, right? And I could go on and on about all the different things about Calico Critters. So that would be descriptive. So we're going to read this paragraph that describes what apartheid was. So remember, that first step we're doing, we're just reading each paragraph. So let's do that first. Apartheid was a period of history that took place in South Africa from the years 1948 to the early 1990s. During this time, people of different races were separated by various laws that prohibited people of different races to coexist. Some of the laws established during apartheid were the Mixed Marriages Act, the Immorality Amendment Act, and the Population Registration Act, all of which forced people to categorize and separate themselves based on race. Apartheid was established because of the National Party, a largely Dutch political party that controlled the country at the time. Okay, so now I've read that, right? I've gotten a lot of information or a lot of facts about apartheid. So I'm going to go back. What's my second step again? I need to underline any key words that let me know what the text structure is. If I look at my notes, My keywords or my clue words are things like for example, so any examples would count, such as would count, or any adjectives that describe what apartheid was like. Okay? So now let's reread that paragraph one more time and see if we can underline a couple of keywords. Apartheid was a period of history that took place in South Africa from the years 1948 to the early 1990s. Okay, we're going to pause there. Think about what in this sentence tells us what apartheid was. Go ahead and underline it. I'm going to underline apartheid was a period of history. You could underline more than that, right? But I'm going to start with was a period of history, right? That clearly tells me what apartheid was. Okay, let's keep going. During this time, people of different races were separated by various laws that prohibited people of different races to coexist. So let's think. Is there anything in that sentence that describes what apartheid was like? I would argue that people of different races were separated by various laws, right? That gives me more information. You could also argue that this works as well. Prohibited people of different races to coexist. Because that also describes what apartheid was like. Some of the laws established during apartheid were the Mixed Marriages Act, the Immorality Amendment Act, and the Population Registration Act, all of which forced people to categorize and separate themselves based on race. Okay, so let's think, right? We also have that description could be any examples of apartheid. In that sentence, what were some good examples of what apartheid was? I would say that the Mixed Marriages Act, the Immorality Amendment Act, and the Population Registration Act are all examples of laws that occurred during apartheid, right? There's also a part of this sentence that describes what those laws did, okay? Let's read that last sentence and see if there's any other clues. Apartheid was established because of the National Party, a largely Dutch political party that controlled the country at the time. Okay, this one is kind of tricky. Does this tell us what apartheid was or why it was established? I think it tells us why it was established. So that doesn't really tell us exactly what apartheid was, right? We have to dig a little deeper with some of these sentences and figure out what the meaning of them actually is. So I've underlined my keywords. The last thing that I need to do is I need to write a sentence that proves why each passage matches its text structure. And there's something wrong with this question here. Remember, I don't make mistakes. Can you figure out what is wrong with this question? I want you to figure it out. This should not say sequence chronological. This should actually say description. Go ahead and write that. And then we're going to write a similar sentence starter to this one, and I want you to finish the sentence based off of what we just talked about. So we're going to say this passage uses the description text structure because and I want you to try and finish writing that sentence. Why does this use the description text structure? How does this paragraph explain what apartheid was? Go ahead and write your answer and pause the video. The sentence I wrote says, this passage uses the description text structure because it tells us examples and details about apartheid. I think that's a good explanation of why this matches the descriptive text structure. Now, your job is to finish the assignment. We still have 3 more text structures for you to go through: cause and effect, compare and contrast, and problem solution. We're going to talk about these next week when I come back. So if you're feeling a little stuck, that's okay. I want you to just do your best. Power through. You've got this.